Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Architectural Technologist. Welcome, Ethan.
Good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I understand you've got a question about teaching a design studio for architectural technology students.
Yeah, that's what we're planning at our school. It's quite interesting. I'm quite excited because this is my first time teaching specifically for architectural technologies, and I'll be introducing design studios to the students, which I don't know what will happen, but let's see in a few days. The reason was for architectural technologies, the course is mainly focused on the technical parts of it. And they are quite, after they finish the diploma, they're usually very good at technical drawings and they know how to draw. They had learned how different elements works together and they are very good at documentations and the quality assurance purposes. But when it comes to creative design of creative architectures for the curriculums doesn't have too much space, not much emphasis on the creative design and architectures and space and architectural history at all. So because of that, we are thinking about let's do a little bit introductions when there is a gap. For example, I'm teaching the scoping and preliminary design too, so which is the medium-sized buildings, and that will be quite interesting. They will do some designing of the building. So I also check other previous students of the other school, and I won't name which school is it. The scope is something like you need to design 5 mini shopping mall with the 5 rooms, 5 shops with various size, and you have a car parking, and you need to make a delivery from the back. But when I look at the students' answer, usually it's a square shapes all the shops. So you can do other shapes. You can do circular, oval. Just if you just only think about the flat plan, you can do circular, oval, rhombus, different geometry, and also you can just let the solar directions to dominance. Like you want to get the sun's exposures all the way, so you can do different size to take care of all the environmental effects, to make sure you got all the environmental effects, that kind of things. Or when you might also think about the surrounding, for example, if the view, you want to make sure that the building has the nice view all the time, etc. So that's one of the thing. So when I look at it and students, we've introduced that kind of things when we do the what's that, when we teach a little bit of the was it visual design, no, design, DBE, design in built environment, in the diploma level, and the students has learned the architectural history and the design elements and the shapes and the forms, and they became a critics. So they grasped that kind of idea a little bit early last semester, but this year they need to show they can apply these design principles in their design. So that's things we are thinking, and because of that, like the design studios, there will be no codes written for them, so they need to find out by themselves. They need to research how other architects or other firm has done. So compared to my time, it was very difficult because I need to go website by website and go and see, oh, this architect has done that. That now we have Arch Daily, so probably they can go to a Arch Daily website and they can do that. So I'm quite excited for what should I say, the end result at the end of the semester. And let's see what will happen. And I don't think I'll be a marker. I don't want to be a marker because I've supervised these students. So they will do the presentations and the other tutors will straight away mark their assignment and hopefully they will pass. So that's the plan.
So have you written the assessment yet?
Assessment? Which assessment?
For this presentation? There's got to be a marking strategy. There's got to be a rubric for how you mark them. But let's get back to the big question about teaching design to architectural technology students. I don't know if you remember, but one of our very early podcasts was the guy from New Plymouth. Oh, goodness, I've forgotten his name.
What's that? Boone Architecture.
Terry Boone.
Terry Boone, yep.
And one of the things that Terry Boone said was that the design always comes out of the site analysis.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think you need to make sure that the students have picked a site that they can look at or that they can get information about, because the analysis of that design is going to be based on, the design is going to be based on the analysis of that,
Yeah.
of that site.
Yeah.
The things that you're talking about, I've done all of these things, but actually it's easy to, you talk about a mini mall, 5 shops, that they need to have deliveries. They need to have one needs to be probably a hospitality one, so that they need to put a kitchen, toilets, all that kind of stuff, outdoor seating area. They need to have a bit more thought. So that's really important that you've got a very detailed brief for them, so that that can then be marked against that brief. But if we step back for a moment and we look at the idea of the diploma, and we've talked about this several times, that the diploma doesn't really give us enough time to do design, to teach design. And my theory has always been that design is from the very beginning, and it goes all the way through to contract completion, that you can't separate design from any of the stages that are in there. So for example, if we have a concept for the design of the building, then the way the doors are installed, the way the windows are detailed, the way the skirtings are detailed, ceilings, the roof form, all of that is tied to your design concept. So if you're doing a modernist building, you're not going to put a hip roof on it, for example.
No.
I worked on a project in Auckland, massive house. It was, and when we got to detail, so the house was big, very big house, very modernist house. So when we came to detail the junction for the skirtings, the modernist design philosophy had to be carried through for how we put the skirtings in. In fact, instead of having skirtings, we had negative details. So we had a little channel painted black at the bottom and at the top. So that's my idea, is that you need to carry that all the way through. During the construction, everything that comes up has got to be referred to that detail concept or that design concept. So you're saying, okay, the contractor's got a problem with this detail. What's the design concept? How do we resolve it and make sure that our details are consistent with our design concept? When we get through to snagging, post-construction, let's go through the building. Let's check the building, making sure that we're checking the building, not just for, is it painted? Is it done this? But do the details comply? Has the contractor built the building in accordance with the details? And does the work of the contractor is it still consistent with our design concept?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by it actually flows all the way through. So from my point of view, it's always been very sad that we don't have time to teach that. Where I used to teach at EIT, we had a completely different structure from every other polytech in New Zealand. And we had the ability to actually spend time designing a house in year 1 and then documenting it. And in year 2, we had the opportunity to design a building of a site, and so that each student had the ability to design their own building that had 3 apartments, each floor, had commercial downstairs, had car parking, had deliveries, all the stuff that you've talked about, sun, solar study, all that stuff. But it was a design that they had looked at.
Yeah.
So to me, there's always been this relationship between design and documentation.
Yes.
And there was another thing as well, and that is that if you give the students the ability to design their building, and then you use that building for the documentation papers.
Yes, that's what we do.
That you then, hopefully, give the student more belief in their building. I noticed that at EIT, they've changed that documentation paper. They've been given a brief now. In fact, they've been given a concept building. So that the position of the stairs, the number of rooms, the bedrooms, all that's already given to the student. And I don't think it gives the student the same investment in that documentation than if they had designed it themselves. The other challenge I've got, and one of the other things that comes up out of design, is that there's a relationship between design, detailing, documentation, and it goes in a circular way.
Yeah.
So you've got a design, you've got this concept, a wonderful concept. You start doing the design and you do the details, and you realize, oh, if I do that wall connection, that's a really tricky detail. Maybe I need to move the design a little
All
bit
the
to
adjustment.
make that easier. And then you come back to the design. Yes, now I'm going to change that. I get back into the documentation, the detailing. Oh, goodness, now I realize that I should have done something. So then it's back to the design, making changes to it, rather than trying to fight with those details to make them work when they're clearly not going to. You've got this circular process, what you might call an iterative process. Every
Yes.
decision gets closer and closer to the final answer until you've got your final drawings. In all cases, every detail should be applied back to the design.
Yeah.
And that's what I was taught, was that there's this relationship between details and design.
So that's what will happen too, because we only have 17 weeks for one semester. So the first half of the semester we'll be doing the scoping and preliminary design. So they will develop the design, and after that it's documentation too will carry on all the detailing. So that's aligned with what you just have suggested. So I'm really excited how these students will do.
Is the scoping and design in the same 17 weeks as the documentation?
Yes,
Okay, so they're basically doing 2 papers on 1 building.
one building. So they design and they do that. So that will be
And
interesting.
services? Because you could do the
Services.
services on the same building.
It's services. I'm not so sure they could include that. But for example, like services such as, how should I say, lift, they can include it. Probably they can do, yeah, they should include the ACMB. So,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, and electricals. So they can model
So
it.
if you made it 2 stories, then there needs
Yeah.
to be a lift.
Yeah.
And there's bathrooms upstairs and downstairs. So
Mhm,
you could
mhm.
have 5 shops with
Yeah,
apartment above.
yeah. They have already learned services, so they can include the services in anyway. So that's fine. So they also know the structure, so they can include the structures in their drawings.
Next year, it would be good to move the services paper or move part of the services paper so that they're using the same building to do their services design.
Yeah, but anyway, this is the last semester of them, so they need to combine everything, all the knowledge, apply it, and present to the board of architectural teams, team of
What about
tutors.
visual design or visual communication?
Visual design, and
Yeah.
that one has already done. That
Ah.
one we took opportunity to teach Revit, so they enjoy how to use Revit, and they're very happy about that. So previously, because WellTech, we teach both Revit and KiCad. So one course we use it, we apply it that knowledge to teach ArchiCAD, and VDC we use it for Revit. So they got that idea of how to use Revit because that's quite popular software in the industry. So we decided to go in that way. So now, anyway, they know 2 software, and they have compared to ArchiCAD and Revit. They are quite happy of using Revit as of now. And also they had learned how to use AI. So they studied how to start rendering and prompting of using AI prompts to do the rendering, and they're very happy about that. And one highlight was I had 3 students, exchange students came from Denmark, and one of the boy, his father is an architect, and I teach him how to do rendering with Google Gemini, and his feedback to his father, and his father's son is now using all the architectural rendering by using Gemini, and they are very happy about the result. So yeah, so rendering is not as difficult or as not complicated as before, but there is also the iteration process they need to do again and again to make everything right. But over time it's getting easier because even months by months it's getting more accurate. Even last year we try, for example, upload the frame screenshot of the design and let Gemini to render it, and the result isn't very good. But now, as long as I put a screenshot of the street, I got it from Google Map, and a screenshot of the model which the students drew, and upload it, and Geminis know how to fit into the site of the build, correct site situations, and the proportionally accurate of the buildings at the site. So it's really interesting. for that. So hopefully they can leverage all the emerging technology, not just drawings and AI. So I'll probably teach them how to do AI prompting. They call it prompt engineering as well. So that's will help to, and also I will try to engage with ADNZ this time for their future because ADZ has the link up like what Karin said. I will send an email to her and have a look how she will respond and how the community will help my students for their future.
So just to remind you that in episode 14, we interviewed Karen Davis from
Yes.
ADNZ, and she discussed this bridge, trying to bridge this gap between technical training and going into the industry. One of the problems we discussed in that episode was that it's a bit hit and miss as to whether a student leaves our diploma and gets a good employer to actually teach them design. So it's really important that we give them some design principles, like I just talked about, that idea that details are not separated from design, that we give them a lot of those good principles so that when they leave, they've got some foundation to build their mentorship on. And I think that's really important. I think you'll end up spending a lot of time with the students. One of the things I see in this course is it's not just designing a building, but it's actually the vehicle to bring together all of the stuff they've learned to date: structures, services, art history, detailing, the way buildings are put together. This is the course that allows them to bring all of those threads into one building, and they'll see how they need to think about the services early to make sure there's a ductwork. Otherwise, when they go to do the services, there's nowhere to put the services because there's no ducts in the building.
Yeah.
So I think this is a fantastic idea to actually get the students to bring all of those things together. It's hard to expect the students at this stage to come up with a really beautiful design, but even if they don't come up with a beautiful design, at least you're making sure that they bring all those components that they've learned to date together. We've taught them services, we've taught them site analysis, we've taught them building, how to look at the district plan and the building controls. So they need to make sure that it's a real site so that all of those controls start to come into it. You could even bring in, for example, that it's a commercial building on a residential site, and therefore they need to write
Resource consent.
Yeah, they have to write the resource consent. So that would be another way of bringing that together to make sure that they see that each of these papers that they've done are not actually separate papers. They're all part of one holistic thing that they've got to bring together.
Yeah, that's the idea for that. So that's quite interesting. And I'll be started teaching this by next week, Wednesday. I still need to do some fine tuning, and that's how it.
Yeah, that sounds like a really exciting paper to teach.
I think students will surprise because so far along the way we have, what should I say? I give them something like a textbook written, and they enjoy all the what is in the textbooks. Now there's nothing at all, purposely nothing at all. They need to find out what they have learned, and they need to do research like architectural students in design studio. What they only have is the design brief and the marking rubric, and they just need to do that. So it's really interesting for how they react.
So you could give a lecture, like a 10-minute lecture at the beginning of every thing, saying, by this stage, we need to start thinking about our pre-design. What do we need to know about the site? So you can research everything about your site, and then you walk around the room watching what they do. And the next week, you'll say, okay, you've done your pre-design. Now we need to be looking at our site analysis. Has everyone done their wind analysis, their sun, the solar studies?
So far, they're quite efficient with site analysis, but it's an iteration process. So they know how to find out the solar, the wind, everything. But how will they interpret to the design? That's how artistic, how creative they are. I don't know that. I don't know that side of them.
Because once you've done your site analysis, that's when you could start doing your pencil concept.
Yep. And also, another problem is I'm talking about the current students, and it's a total deviation of approach from previous tutors I just took over last year. And there are some students who will come back because they didn't finish the documentation too. So I don't know how to approach this documentation too. Should I bring the these two students early in to the course because they already passed the scoping 2.
So that scoping 2 is what you're teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, scoping 2, and then whatever they got from scoping 2, they need to do documentations. But there are students who stuck on documentation 2 last.
That's a tricky one. I don't think that's the subject for our podcast.
Yeah, that's a reality of what's happening to me.
It sounds like a really interesting thing. I got to admit that I always thought it was a good idea the way we had the EIT structured, where the students are in semester 1, they actually do all the site analysis and concept design and scoping. And then in the second semester, they would do services on that building, they would do structure on that building, they would do the documentation on that building. And because they designed the building, it was their responsibility to document what they had designed. And by doing that, of course, they also learn that design should have included some of these thoughts early. And when it doesn't, the problems that they generate by not thinking of the whole building and all of the things that have got to go into it. I understand that you're doing this, but I think that what we should have done was to get the moderation meeting to agree that this is actually a fundamental part of architectural technology, and to restructure the courses across the country to do that. I know that ARA is actually looking at making changes to their course, and maybe that would be a great model to use so that we still stick with the papers we've got, but we organize those papers in a way that allows that to happen. Now, there's going to be some resistance from some tutors
I know.
who like to make sure that we can give the student the building. That way they can document that the building we've given them, and therefore we know exactly what the problems are when we come to mark their assessments. So their assessments should actually match. And that could almost be taken over by AI. But what we really should be doing is helping the students, and it means more work for us, but we should be helping the students documenting the building that they have designed. Because by doing that, it improves the way they design on the next project. And it's a bit like taking your students onto site. When they graduate, if you're an employer, take your young staff onto site and make them answer the questions for the contractor about the details they have drawn. Because as soon as they realize that the contractor is not understanding the detail, they will learn to detail better. And that would be my theory, is that we need to make sure that they see the whole process. And the danger of the current course is that they don't see the whole process. They see lots of little parts of the process without bringing the whole thing back together. So congratulations on bringing the whole thing back together on one paper. I think you'll have a good time.
I hope that the students will have fun for this semester, and let's see what will happen at the end of this semester. I hope everybody will be successful.
Thank you for sharing that, Ethan. Hey, don't forget, if you're listening to this podcast, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify and hit the notification bell so that you get notified every time we've released a new podcast.
Thank you, and see you next week.
See you next week, Ethan.